Welcome to this presentation on how to fillet, trim, and cook fish that you've caught, especially fish that may contain chemical contaminants such as PCBs, dioxin, murex, and DDT. Fish can be part of a healthy diet, and catching your own fish is rewarding and can save you money. However, if you fish in New York's Hudson River south of the Federal Dam at Troy and you want to eat the fish that you have caught there, there's some things you need to consider. First, know the New York State Department of Health advice for eating fish from the waters that you're fishing in. And due to industrial pollution in the Hudson River, fish in this section of the river can contain chemicals PCBs, which accumulate in the fat tissue of the fish. Certain sections of the population are more vulnerable to these pollutants, such as women of reproductive age and young children. And all of these fish advisories can be found in this handy booklet from the New York State Department of Health, and you can also find it online. In this presentation, I'm going to demonstrate filleting, skinning, and removing excess fat from the fish, which is where the PCB exposure might come from, and some culinary tips and things to make a delicious meal. So let's get started. So this is a beautiful striped bass from the Hudson River, and they do migrate up the river, so it's fun to catch and potentially cleaner than fish that reside all year long in the Hudson River, but we still want to make sure we get all the fats out of it and follow the advice for PCB contamination. So just so you know, this fish was caught yesterday, so it's already been gutted and gilled, and that's to keep it fresh and safe to eat for longer. It's been on ice since then, and now we're going to fillet it. So the first thing you want to do is lay it on its side and get a nice sharp fillet knife that's flexible. And we're gonna cut down along behind the head and along the gill. And then we're gonna turn it on the top here. And I'm gonna use a little slightly heavier fillet knife because this is a nice big scaly fish. You're gonna cut down just along the top. And again, you can see it takes a little bit to get through the scales. And you want to follow the bones of the rib cage. Follow that. All along the top. Kind of use your fingers to peel it back as you go. Kind of angle it a little better so you can see here on the camera. And you're just going right along the top. A lot of nice meat on this big of a fish. Down. To the tail. Then I go back and I continue to follow just along the ribs, peeling back as I go, to peel this fillet off. Now, some people just cut this right here, or you can keep following the rib around towards the bottom. We're not going to save a lot of the belly fat because that's where a lot of the belly fat, that's where a lot of the fat is. So we're not going to save a lot of that in the end anyhow. So you just keep filleting down along the ribs, getting as much fish meat as possible. And then at the bottom here, we're just going to cut that. So trimming and skinning like this works really well for removing PCB type contaminants. However, it won't remove mercury or heavy metals. So if you have looked in the advice book and you see that there's that kind of contamination in the place where you're fishing, this isn't going to help you. Now we're just going to go follow all the way along till we get down to the tail. Now, I like to keep it attached at the tail, and I just flip it over. And that way it's attached for me to remove the skin. So now I'm going to take the skin off this fillet. And I'm going to go down just till I hit the skin, and then I'm just going to run my knife up along. In fact, I'm going to get this longer fillet knife because it's a nice thick fillet here. I'm going to go down along, kind of sawing back and forth, wiggling it a little to get that skin off. So there's the skin. And there's my first fillet. Okay. So now we're going to repeat that process on the other side. So again, we're going to trim any little bits of skin and fat off of the fillet. You can use whatever shaped knife you're most comfortable with, so long as it's flexible and sharp. It'll make your job a lot easier. You want to trim any of the belly fat that you see on there. So on the striped bass, this red meat contains a lot of the fat. You've probably heard in cooking, fat is flavor. So in this case, that red meat also creates a stronger, fishier flavor. So really, to enjoy mild striper, you want to get as much of that red meat off, as well as any potential PCB contamination would be in the fattier spots as well. So it's a win-win. As always, be careful of your fingers when you're cutting. Put that piece over here too. You could just run your fingers along it too. Make sure you removed all those pokey bones. But when we cut the rib cage out and that lateral line out, we got most of those pin bones, probably all of them. Okay. So again, on the other half, you want to get all this dark meat off. You want to find your sharpest knife, which is this one. And if you're watching this and thinking, wow, she's cutting a lot of meat off of there, again, it's that fishy flavored meat that you don't necessarily want to eat, and it's the fatty meat that you definitely don't want to eat for chemical reasons. So if you're thinking sushi, that's not what we're doing here. So again, we have this lateral line exposed. I'm just going to cut down. And you can hear the bones, you can feel the bones down there. And on this particular piece, I'm going to cut it right there. I'm just going to cut that bit off. And remove all those bones with that piece of meat. And down at this end, towards the tail, just could do a little V shape because there's no bones there. But still, you want to get a bunch of that lateral line out and that fat. And the same kind of principle applies for all sizes of fish in terms of filleting and getting the skin off. Trimming out as much of the bones as possible. Obviously, if you have a bigger fish, it's a little easier. You'll have more meat at the end, as opposed to a smallmouth bass or a largemouth bass, where you'll have a much smaller fillet at the end. Okay, so now we can portion these into sort of serving size pieces. This one could be cut in half, but I know some good eaters in my family, so I'm going to keep these two at that size, and then I'm going to just cut this one to about a 6 to 8 ounce portion of fish. They're beautiful fillets. Of course, striped bass can be much, much bigger and you'd have more meat and more fillets, and things you want to think about are, you know, if only certain members of your household can eat it, you can certainly freeze the other portions and enjoy them at another time. Okay, now that we have our beautiful trimmed fillets where all the fat and the skin are off of them, how do you cook them to continue to make them healthier and less fatty? So you want to use a cooking technique where the fat will drip through. So you can use a grill pan and cook them directly on a grill and let that fat drip through. This is a nice mild fish, so any marinades or rubs that you want to put on them will really flavor them up, and then you can grill them. Perfect. Or you can broil them in the oven or bake them in the oven, but use a broiler pan where you can see that the juices and the fats will drip through again. And you don't want to save that fat for any kind of gravy with this type of fish, again, because we're removing the fats to remove the PCBs so that they're healthy. And it's a delicious fish, cook up nice and healthy. If you have read that you're only supposed to eat them once a month, then you can freeze them for future meals. Enjoy. Okay, our fish is out of the oven. It's been in there about 10 minutes, and you can see that it just flakes. It's still nice and moist, but it flakes apart. I'll eat that one since I pulled it apart. And you just want to slip it over to a plate that has some nice colors on it. You eat with your eyes. It's always important to add a little garnish, make it look pretty. And there you go. Delicious.